acquittal. It's basically when a defense counsel says, look, there was not enough evidence to convict this person. And this is regarding the 2 convictions that he got, right? 2 charges of transportation to engage in prostitution. I mean, it basically says what it is. It's transporting people across state lines for the purposes and internationalized for the purposes of sex work. There doesn't have to be force, fraud, or coercion. It was literally transporting men. Cassie, Jane, that's it. Okay, first issue I understand was about the timing of that motion, right? What happened there?
Yeah, so initially the government was kind of making the argument here, and it was first starting off with Meredith Foster, because I think a lot of people have to remember the lead prosecutor in this case, Maureen Comey, was no longer there because she's been dismissed from her job, which has been reportedly nothing to do with this case or anything like that. That's another story for another day. But Meredith Foster was making these arguments for the government, and it seems like at first they were kind of talking about challenging the jury instructions, particularly, and they cited some cases, one from 2025, USA versus Kelly, and how the defendant in that case argued on appeal that it was unconstitutionally vague for Mann Act and RICO conspiracy. But the government was pretty much arguing that this should have been raised pre-trial. They were citing cases from 2003, 1973, just about the broader concerns. But the government was saying it felt like the defense was kind of taking a second bite of the apple. They were encouraging, or the government was saying that the defense is encouraging the defendant to raise these claims afterwards. It says that the defense didn't raise these issues until even after trial, and it says that it should have been kind of raised during the indictment phase. Whereas Alexandra Shapiro, who was making the defense arguments, she was saying that the law on Rule 12 is extremely restrictive, and she says that there's no way to make this argument at an earlier point because this was kind of a result of the acquittal, because he was found not guilty of RICO conspiracy and sex trafficking, victim 1, and Jane, victim 1 being Cassie Ventura. And so the defense was saying that they were unable to make that argument any earlier, and so they were kind of trying to do it now because that was the most appropriate time for them.
You put that to the side about the timing. The judges, okay, put the timing aside. I go now to the substance, whether or not there are substantive, real grounds to throw these convictions out. One of the arguments, and I have to say a lot of these have actually been consistent with arguments that were made in prior filings by the defense.
If you're a trader living in the UK,
Holmes didn't make any money off of this prostitution, or he didn't pay for it himself, right? There's like a commercial aspect argument. What did they say?
Yeah, so initially they were going to be asking kind of 4 questions, then that both sides had to answer these questions. So this was brought up during question 2 about whether or not the Mann Act prosecution had a financial motive and whether or not the defendant kind of fall under the second liability, which is something I completely didn't know about because I'm not a lawyer or anything like that. But it was interesting kind of hearing those arguments. So the defense, starting off, that also being Alexandra Shapiro, she was saying that the statute should be construed narrowly to pimps and prostitution. She said that Mr. Combs was an alleged consumer and that this is just kind of a wire type of case. And it seemed like that's what the defense's whole argument was, that he was just financially giving the money, but it wasn't that he was necessarily making the money. And so the judge said, well, why wouldn't Combs be liable for willfully, under that willfully causing theory? And the defense said no, because it's talking about the transportation aspect and the mens rea is that people would engage.
Intent.
Yes, exactly. And the intent that people would engage in prostitution, you can't say that he's willfully doing that necessarily because he, in essence, was just watching